Good morning, friends. Welcome to the Immanuel 10 at 10. We're reading our way through the book of, uh, reading our way through the entire Bible using the 1 year chronological reading plan. This week we finished the book of Numbers. This fascinating book tells the story of wanderings in the wilderness. Even though God provided for them and guided them all along the way, they rebelled against the Lord. He brought judgment on them, but also showed them mercy. These wilderness stories contrast Israel's rebellion with God's faithfulness. The stories in this book get retold by the prophets, the psalmists, and the apostles, so they really form the basis for the whole story of the Bible. God is faithful to his promises, but he will let his people walk away and experience the consequences. One of the fascinating stories in this book is the story of Balak and Balaam. Balak was the king of Moab, and when he saw the Israelites camping nearby, he was afraid that they would conquer his nation. So he hired a seer named Balaam to curse them for him. Uh, he said, "A people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. Now come and put a curse on these people because they are too powerful for me. Perhaps then I'll be able to defeat them and drive them out of the country. For I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed." But God told Balaam not to put a curse on the Israelites because they were blessed by him. But when Balak sent even more messengers, Balaam went along with him. He warned Balak that he could not do anything, great or small, to go beyond the command of the Lord. Well, on the way, the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose Balaam. Balaam's donkey saw the angel with a drawn sword and turned off the road into a field. Balaam beat the donkey to get her back on the road. Then the angel went ahead and stood in the narrow path between two vineyards, which were surrounded by walls. The donkey pressed close to the stone wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it. So he beat her again. Then the angel went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn, and the donkey laid down in the middle of the road. Balaam beat the donkey yet again, but God opened the donkey's mouth so that it could speak. She asked Balaam why he had beaten her 3 times. And he said, "You've made a fool of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn. The angel asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared her." The donkey could see better than the seer. Well, Balaam had Balak offer 7 bulls and 7 rams on 7 altars. He went up, uh, Balak took him to a spot where he could see part of the people of Israel down in the valley. But Balak said, "How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? Who can count the dust of the people of Jacob?" And Balak was furious. He said, "I brought you here to curse them, but you have only blessed them." So then Balak took Balaam to another overlook where he could see another part of the people, thinking maybe you'll be able to curse them for me from here. But Balak said to him, "God is not a man that he should lie. He's not someone who would change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fill? I've received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot change it." And so he gave another blessing to the Israelites. Well, was furious again, and so he took Balaam to a third place where he could look out over the entire Israelite people camped in the valley. And he built another 7 altars and offered 7 more bulls and 7 more rams a third time. And this time, Balaam again gave another blessing. He said, "How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel." He went on to tell Balak, "Did I not tell the messengers you sent me, even if Balak gave me his palace filled with silver and gold, I could not do anything of my own accord, good or bad, to go beyond the command of the Lord. I must only say what the Lord tells me to say." And then he spoke about the promise that God would give to the Israelites, that a star would come out of Jacob, a scepter would rise out of Israel, that he would crush the foreheads of Moab, and that a ruler would come out of Jacob and destroy the survivors of the city. This echoes the promise that um, Jacob gave to his sons after he had come down to Egypt in Genesis 49, that he promised that there would be a star that would rise out of Judah's tribe, that there would be a scepter that would arise from Judah's tribe who would rule the nations. That pointed ahead to David, the king who came out of Judah's line, but then it also pointed beyond that to another king who would come later from David's own line, a baby born in Bethlehem, just as David had been born, Jesus. In Genesis 12, God had promised Abraham that he would bless those who blessed him and curse those who cursed him. All of Abraham's descendants would be blessed so that they would be a blessing to the world. In the plains of Moab, the Israelites didn't even know that God was protecting them in the valley while someone up on the hills was trying to curse them. Later on, Balaam encouraged the women of Midian to lure the Israelite men to worship their gods. He ended up dying with the Midianites when the Israelites fought against them. God is faithful to his promises, but he allows us to go our own way when we choose to abandon him. Chapters 28 and 29 of Numbers briefly describe several different festivals the Israelites were to celebrate every year to remind them of God's faithfulness. They were to honor the Sabbath each week to remind them that God had delivered them from slavery. They celebrated the Passover each year to remember how they were saved from the final plague on Egypt by putting the blood of a lamb on their doorposts. 50 days later was the Feast of Weeks, a harvest festival where they offered the first fruits of their crops to the Lord. Then came the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement, followed by the Feast of Tabernacles, where they lived in shelters to remind themselves of their years wandering in the wilderness. Every one of these festivals tells the story of the Israelite nation, but also points toward the Messiah. Jesus is the true Passover lamb, whose blood delivers us from death and takes away the sins of the world. 50 days after he was raised from the dead came the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost, which means 50. On that day, the Holy Spirit brought 3,000 people to faith. A new harvest had begun. When Jesus returns, he will bring the hosts of heaven with him with the sound of the archangel's trumpet. Jesus brought salvation once for all by offering his life for ours, making atonement for us, making us at one with God. He goes with us through the wilderness of our lives, providing everything we need from day to day. He is the one who gives us true Sabbath rest. As Christians, we worship on the 8th day, the day Jesus was raised from the dead. Sunday is the beginning of a new week that looks forward to the new creation that Jesus will bring. Well, by the end of Numbers, the entire generation who had come out of Egypt had died in the wilderness. Moses had a census of their children taken, just as he had taken a census at the beginning of their wandering through the wilderness. God gave them victory over their enemies, and some of the tribes began to settle on the east side of the Jordan River. They were poised and ready to enter the promised land. Moses knew that he would not be able to enter the promised land himself, so he reminded the Israelites of all the ways God had provided for and carried them through the wilderness. The book of Deuteronomy, which we are starting now, contains Moses' final words to the people. Deuteronomy means second law because in it Moses explained God's law to them, showing them how God wanted them to order their lives so that they would flourish in the land he was bringing them into. Moses called them to be faithful to the covenant God made with them. When we are reading these laws today, we shouldn't compare them with our modern laws, but with the laws of Israel's neighbors at that time. Throughout the book, we see that God was calling Israel to a higher level of justice and love. As we read the laws in our own context, we can discern the core principles underlying each law, which helps us apply it to our own lives. God has given us his entire word as a way of shaping our lives and reminding us how he has been faithful to his people from the very beginning all the way to this present day. Well, hope to see you this Sunday for worship at 8:30 and 10:45 with Sunday school and adult education in between at 9:45. On Wednesday night, our Lenten service is at 6:30. And of course, all of our worship services are also available right here on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. Have a great weekend. See you soon.